Shalom. So today we're going to discuss a 2,000-year-old question. Should Christians or Bible believers eat pork? Now, if you're a Jew or a Hebrew Israelite, you already know, or if you only believe in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, you already know you cannot eat pork. Now, what we're going to discuss here is a New Testament doctrine of why the church, or why they're getting this interpretation of the New Testament, why they justify that they could eat whatever they want now, whether it be shellfish, unclean meat, etc. We're going to go ahead and discuss and see what the Word of God says about this matter. We're going to start off in the Torah, also known as the Law of God, the Law of Moses, the Word of God. Leviticus 11, verse 7. The pig, because it's cloven-footed, it does not chew the cud. It is unclean to you. Deuteronomy 14:8. And the pig, because it parts the hoof, but does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. For those of you who don't know what chew the cud means, that's speaking of the digestive system of the pig. It's not like other clean animals that have multiple stomachs where it could digest, bring up the food, chew it, and break it down correctly. The pig doesn't do that. Now, before we move forward, I want you guys to understand something. When you understand the dietary laws and you study how to identify what is a clean and an unclean animal, whether it's shellfish or meat, the pig is the only unclean animal that can deceive you on looks because it is cloven-footed. All the other unclean beasts do not have split hooves, so you could ID them right away and understand that they are unclean. The pig can deceive you because of the foot, but this is God here telling you it does not chew the cud. And there's many symbolism in the pig in regards of unclean and being deceived, right? Now, before we move forward, let's see, you guys need to establish that God here in the Torah is saying that the pig is unclean to you. Don't be misled by these other pastors and these bishops that I see who are trying to say, hey, these unclean animals is representing people and this is talking about sin. No, God in Leviticus 11 goes on, and in Deuteronomy, specifically speaking about animals, whether it's the bird life, animals of the sea, or land animals. He's giving you a distinction between what is right and what is wrong. Let's see what the prophets have to say about unclean animals. Isaiah 65, 2-4. I spread out my hands all day to rebellious people who walk in the way that is not good, a people who provoke me to my face continually, who eat pig's flesh and the broth of unclean meat in their vessels. Now, this is God saying, hey, look at, these are people who are rebellious. Now, I've heard Christian pastors who try to say, oh, this is a representation of sin. This is not talking about actual animals. Even if they believe that, it's completely out of context. But even if they do, it's still symbolizing that pig is sin, that it's unclean. Let's see. Let's keep moving forward. Isaiah 66, 15-17. For the Lord will come with fire, and his chariots like a whirlwind, to pay back his anger in fury, and his rebuke in flames of fire. For by fire the Lord will execute judgment. By his sword all flesh and all those slain by the Lord shall be many. Those who sanctify and purify themselves go into the gardens, following one another, eating the flesh of pigs, the mouse, and rodents. They shall come to an end together, thus saith the Lord. So this is a future prophecy, an end of days prophecy here in Isaiah 66, where God is stating those who continue, is speaking about idol worship here, right? The practices they're doing, but they're also eating unclean, sacrificing unclean animals and eating these unclean animals. So I ask you guys, for you Christians, you guys do admit that pig was unclean in the Old Testament, like you guys like to say, but you say in the New Testament you're allowed to eat whatever you want. I ask you guys, how does that make any sense to teach that? Oh, you don't teach that God changes, but yet in the Old Testament it's unclean, in the New Testament it's clean. But you have a prophet, a witness here, saying in the end of days the pig is still a representation and an actual physical sin to be eating it. You guys got to use common logic here. Now, before anyone tries to say that the law is for the Jews or for the Israelites only, because I know there's Christian theologians who teach that kind of stuff. They're all through the scriptures in the Tanakh. You're going to see where God is talking about cleaving Gentiles who cleave to the Israelites, or servants to the Israelites, or who cleave into, the tribes, that they must keep the Torah as well. The law applies to them too. Now, there's differences between, the nations, but those who are cleaving into the house of Israel and to the God, the people of God, they have to keep the law as well. They keep the Torah as well. The prophets tell you this, even in the coming kingdom, that those Gentiles who do cleave and who do observe the Sabbath and keep the commandments, that God will recognize them as well, right? So you got to keep the Torah. Don't be fooled by that. Now, we're going to go. This video is mainly, like I said, for a lot of you Christians who are on the fence here, who don't have understanding, or you people who are barely coming out of the church and want a better understanding of the dietary laws, right? Now, I was a Christian for many years. I was a Messianic Jew for a bit. I know the doctrine. I taught it. It was dogmatic. But I'm going to go to the main reason why Christians believe that in the New Testament, God has ordained that you can eat whatever you want. And there's a few scriptures, but let's go to Acts chapter 10. This is Peter's vision, right? So in Acts chapter 10, you have Peter here. God, opens a sheet in the heavens, and you have all kinds of manner of unclean beasts. And God tells Peter, kill and eat, kill and eat. Peter denies this vision 3 times. And God tells him, hey, what I have made clean, don't call it unclean or uncommon, right? Now, I want you guys to put your little thinking caps on and ask yourself, if Peter is the rock of, the Christian church, for Catholics, he's the first pope, the doctrines are all over the place. But Peter was Jesus' right-hand man. Whether you're calling Yeshua, Yahushua, Yahushai, it doesn't matter. Peter was his right-hand man. He walked with him through his ministry for 3 years. If Jesus taught that you could eat whatever you want and I'm going to cleanse this, I think Peter would know that. Ask yourself, why is Peter denying this? Mind you, this vision is supposedly like 10 years after the ascension of Jesus. So, it's about a decade later, scholars try to say. So ask yourself, why would Peter keep denying this? And he says, no, Lord, I have never touched anything uncommon or unclean. He's never ate any unclean. Keeping the dietary laws in Leviticus, right? Because he was a Jew, supposedly. So I don't know. That just makes no sense. If Peter was walking with Jesus and he knew what Jesus was teaching, he would know, hey, I can eat whatever I want. Jesus is going to cleanse everything anyways. So it makes no sense. So you have Jesus here you have Peter here denying God, saying, hey, I can't eat that. God eventually wakes him up. He tells him, hey, there's some men coming to seek you. They're summoning you for Cornelius, a Gentile, right? The centurion. He tells him, go with them, for I have sent them to you. Peter eventually, goes with these men that Cornelius sent. And then once you get down to the bottom of that chapter, Peter's going to explain his vision. When you go down to verse 28, Peter explains the vision, and he tells Cornelius, hey, because Cornelius, invites him in the house. Peter says, hey, it's not really lawful for a Jew to go into a house of a Gentile, right? Calling him unclean, in other words. So you have Peter here in 28 explaining the dream, explaining the vision that God showed him, that I shall call no man unclean. This had nothing to do with food. Had nothing to do with eating the pig, eating, a donkey, anything like that, guys. Stay in context. Read the whole chapter. I know they don't do this in church. You don't read the whole chapter. Peter explains to you what that vision was. God showed him, hey, he was speaking about man. Don't call the Gentile unclean. That's all it was about. It's not about food. So the next point. Don't be fooled by Romans 14. I know a lot of Christian pastors try to go to Romans 14. Don't be fooled by it. This is strictly speaking about fasting, a veggie diet. It has nothing the discussion, the context has nothing to do with unclean meat or clean meat. Don't be fooled by that. Now, another one that I'm going to speak about is 1 Timothy chapter 4. Now, this one could confuse you if you don't know any better. This is where Christians get you, or a pastor will get you. That's why you guys need to study. If you guys knew the law and knew the Torah, you're not going to fall for this. And 1 Timothy 4 says, it speaks about in the last days people would teach lies, doctrines of demons, etc. Saying, don't marry, abstain from certain meats which God has created for you to receive, with thanksgiving, for it was made holy and sanctified by the word and prayer. You guys have to understand, right there in First Timothy, when it was written, the only word at that time is the Tanakh, the Old Testament, the Torah, the law. So what this is speaking about, that is sanctified by the word, the only food that is sanctified, meaning set apart by the word, is Leviticus 11. God sanctified, he set apart those animals, what will be clean. So this is not, now for you guys are saying, oh, these were teachers like me who are coming around with doctrines, of lies, saying don't eat pork, and you guys cannot convey that or even say that's about a Tanakh only or someone who's teaching you to keep the Torah, because in the beginning of this chapter it says doctrines of demons and lies. If you guys are going to say that, if a teacher comes around saying, hey, don't eat pork, don't eat shrimp, don't eat lobster, if you're going to say that's a doctrine of a lie, then you're calling the Torah of the law of God a lie. So you guys cannot relate that to people who are teaching dietary laws. This is speaking of other people who are going around, during that first century era. So do not confuse the Torah with doctrines of lies or demons. I had a pastor once tell me that, which was all over the place, not understanding, hey, the context is not speaking about the Torah or the law of God. Because if you were going to say that, you're calling the word of God, doctrines of demons. It's strictly talking about at this time in the first century, the only word that God sanctified and set food apart is the Torah. So you guys cannot go to First Timothy saying and justify, oh, I can eat what I want. Don't go to the Gospels where Christ says, hey, it doesn't matter what goes into you. It doesn't devour you. It's what comes out. Then go eat some poison, and have someone tell you, oh, you can eat that poison. You're not going to die. Go eat some cyanide. You're not going to die because it's not going to, it's not going to devour you, or it's not going to make you unholy. It's not speaking about food there. You guys got to use certain logic here. Now, another point I wanted to bring up is when you guys, even science and biology back up this kind of stuff. If you guys start studying and understanding how the human body works and how biology works, you're going to understand that the pig is the only animal on earth that doesn't have sweat glands. It literally, all the sweat and the toxins stay within the meat. I remember even when I was in school, you had biology class, and you're dealing with a piece of pig and looking under microscopes, and they'll tell you no matter what temperature you cook that, because you're gonna have a lot of old school people who say as long as you cook it good and clean it, you're all right, you can eat it. No matter how high you cook that swine, it's gonna be unclean. There's always living parasites in it. So even science proves it. Even doctors will tell you, hey, the pork is probably the worst meat that gives you the high blood pressure, etc. We know it's unhealthy for you. Now, for Moses to have this kind of knowledge that he received, it can't be from man. Moses has knowledge in the Torah that God gave him that's divine, that even today we're barely figuring out. And you ask yourself, how did he have this knowledge thousands of years ago, right? Another point I wanted to bring up is the reason why people struggle with this topic is because a lot of us from birth were brought up, especially if you're a Christian or a Catholic, you're brought up eating these kinds of things your whole life. And actually you love them and you like them. It's like sin, right? A lot of stuff could seem attractive that ain't right or good for you, right? So it's just a matter if you're willing to serve God and want to serve him and love him enough to respect his word and obey him and have self-control and stand on what you believe, right? It doesn't matter what the masses think. God is the creator. He created the human body. He knows what's best. He knows what you should put into it, right? Now, this is just one topic. Like I said, I'm making some videos that are just basic lessons for newcomers or people who just want better understanding. I pray you guys keep on studying. Leave idolatry. Leave the false New Testament behind. You guys have to study the Tanakh, the Old Testament. If we all lived in the first century and you guys all had your Torah with you and you hear Paul talking like this, you hear the gospel letters writing like this, you guys will throw it out, understand that they're speaking blasphemy, they're speaking lies, and they're false prophets, right? Because you're commanded to study day and night, right? When you wake up, when you walk it through the day, and when you lay down. But most of us are not. Most of you guys are not. You're zealous for many things, but you're supposed to be zealous for the law, which is the Torah, which is there's mercy, there's grace, there's forgiveness, there's love, unending love all through the Tanakh. Like I always tell people, when it comes to the New Testament and you say, oh yeah, there's some good stuff in there. No, anything new isn't true and anything true isn't new. So you guys have to understand, anything that you see righteous in the New Testament, it's getting it from the Tanakh. So when it sees the love, the patience, the mercy, long suffering, that's all in the Tanakh. It's the same God. Now you Christians who are teaching, hey, God, said it was unlawful in the Old Testament, but now it's lawful in the New Testament. But the prophets are telling you in the kingdom to come and in the last days that this stuff is still unclean, it is a sin. Then you have to reevaluate your faith. You have to look at your New Testament books and understand, hey, these are contradicting the Word of God. I pray you guys all come back to the Tanakh, leave idolatry. Shalom.